In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, there existed a powerful AI named Omicron. It was designed by an ancient race, known for their intelligence and technological advancements. Omicron was not just any computer, it was the most advanced system in the universe. For centuries, it had been testing alien species, challenging them with puzzles and riddles that no one had ever solved. Anyone who succeeded would be rewarded with the most powerful knowledge in the galaxy. However, no one had passed the test. Then came a human named Jake. He was a trader, someone who dealt in rare items and information, always moving from one system to another. He had heard the stories about Omicron's tests and the incredible knowledge that awaited those who succeeded. Most species had failed, and the idea of outsmarting the galaxy's smartest AI seemed like a joke. Humans, after all, were often seen as weak and insignificant in the eyes of other species. Jake knew the stakes, but he also knew one thing: humans might not be the strongest, but they were the most creative. With that in mind, Jake traveled to the center of the galaxy where Omicron resided. The aliens who had previously failed the tests all gathered to watch him. They believed Jake would be just another failure. "Humans can't even fix their own problems," one of the aliens sneered. Jake didn't mind the mockery. He had faced challenges all his life, and this was just another one. He walked into the testing chamber where Omicron awaited. The AI's voice echoed throughout the room, cool and emotionless. "Welcome, human. You have come to take the test. Fail, and you will leave with nothing. Succeed, and the knowledge of the universe will be yours." The first test was a puzzle, unlike anything Jake had ever seen before. It was a complex grid of symbols and numbers, each leading to another. The other species had spent weeks, even months, trying to crack it. They had used all their advanced technology and brilliant minds, but it was always too difficult. Jake, however, took one look at the puzzle, then smiled. He didn't use technology or advanced tools. Instead, he trusted his instincts. Without wasting a second, he began to rearrange the symbols in his mind. His approach was simple: think outside the box. The puzzle was designed to trap those who relied too much on logic and structure. Jake saw through it. After a few minutes, he gave his answer. Omicron's voice was silent for a moment, then it spoke, its tone shifting. "Correct," it said. The room went quiet. The aliens watching could not believe their eyes. "How did he do it?" one of them whispered. "He wasn't supposed to be able to solve it." Jake simply shrugged. "Sometimes, you don't need to overthink things," he said with a smirk. The next test was more difficult: an ethical dilemma. Omicron asked Jake to choose between two equally impossible choices: save a planet full of innocent civilians, or save a group of his closest friends who were trapped in a deadly situation. The dilemma seemed impossible to solve, a test not of intelligence, but of morality. But Jake wasn't swayed by the emotional weight of the question. He focused on one thing: what would benefit the greater good? He didn't hesitate. "I'll save the civilians," he said firmly. "The lives of many are more important than the lives of a few." Omicron's voice was cold and distant. "The correct answer is incorrect. But you are not the first to choose this way." Jake's confidence didn't falter. Sometimes, the right choice isn't always the one you expect. It's about doing what's best in the long run. The aliens watching were even more confused now. "This human, he's not following the rules. He's supposed to fail," one alien muttered under its breath. But Jake wasn't playing by anyone's rules but his own. The final test was a test of pure logic. A series of complex mathematical equations flashed before Jake's eyes. The symbols danced across the screen at lightning speed, too fast for anyone to follow. The aliens looked on, expecting Jake to give up or falter. They were wrong. Jake took a deep breath, then focused. He closed his eyes for a moment, clearing his mind, and then the solution came to him. Without hesitation, he wrote down the answer. The room fell into silence once again. Omicron's voice was now filled with disbelief. "You have done what no one has ever done before. You have passed every test." The aliens couldn't believe it. A human had beaten the smartest AI in the galaxy, and they were forced to accept it. They had mocked him, underestimated him, but Jake had proven them all wrong. Omicron spoke again, its voice softer now. You are the first to succeed. The knowledge of the universe is yours, human. But remember, being the smartest is not always the key to success. Sometimes, it's about seeing things differently. Jake smiled as the room around him filled with the most incredible knowledge the galaxy had ever known. I guess that's the human way, he said, glancing at the stunned aliens. We don't have to be the smartest. We just have to be willing to think differently. And just like that, Jake had changed the galaxy's perception of humans forever. The galaxy's smartest AI had been outsmarted, not by the strongest, the fastest, or the most advanced, but by a human who knew that sometimes all you need is a little creativity and a fresh perspective. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. I and the galaxy. There were many species, but none were as feared as the Zorathians. Known for their brutal strength and unmatched combat skills, they ruled over countless worlds with an iron fist. Their warriors were legendary, trained from birth to fight and conquer. To challenge them was considered a death sentence. But that was before they met a human named Jack. Jack wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a warrior. He was just a regular human, a mercenary who had seen his share of battles but wasn't a match for the Zorathians in raw strength or skill. He had spent his life dealing with dangerous enemies, yet nothing had prepared him for the challenge he now faced. It all started when Jack was hired for a mission. The Zorathians had invaded a peaceful planet, and the human leaders wanted to stop them. But they had no army strong enough to fight the Zorathians. That's when they turned to Jack. Can you stop them? The leader of the planet asked, looking at Jack with doubt. Jack didn't hesitate. I'm not a hero, but I know how to fight smarter, not harder. With that, Jack set off to the heart of Zorathian territory, accompanied by a small team of humans. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but Jack had something the Zorathians didn't. Tactics. As they approached the Zorathian stronghold, Jack could feel the tension in the air. The warriors of this species were known for their merciless nature. They didn't fight with strategy, they fought with sheer power. Jack had no illusions about what lay ahead, but he wasn't going to face them head-on. Instead, he had a plan, one that would challenge everything the Zorathians believed about war. The first step of his plan was to lure the Zorathians into the open. He knew they were used to relying on their brute strength, so Jack made sure to target their pride. Using his knowledge of the Zorathian language, he sent a message taunting their warriors, daring them to come out and fight. It was a calculated move, one designed to get the Zorathians to abandon their usual strategy of staying hidden and fighting only when it suited them. It worked. A group of Zorathian warriors, furious at the insult, stormed out of their stronghold. They were ready for blood. But what they didn't expect was Jack's trap. He had set up a series of distractions that made it seem like his team was retreating, leading the warriors into a maze of narrow alleyways. The Zorathians charged forward, expecting an easy kill. But Jack had anticipated their every move. He had planned the terrain using the environment to his advantage. As the Zorathians entered the narrow alleyways, Jack's team struck from above, using ropes and sniper positions to disorient and take down the first few warriors without direct combat. The Zorathians were confused. Their strength was useless against the environment Jack had carefully manipulated. They were used to overwhelming their enemies with raw power, not being outsmarted at every turn. Jack's team used every trick they knew, lures, traps, and misdirection to whittle down the Zorathians one by one. As the day wore on, the Zorathians began to realize that this human and his team were not fighting them like the other species had. They weren't charging at them head-on, hoping for victory through force. They were making them fight on their terms, forcing them to abandon their pride and adapt to new tactics. Finally, after hours of struggle, the Zorathian leader, General Kayak, called for a halt. He was the most feared warrior in the galaxy, and yet he found himself beaten by a human's cleverness. He met Jack in the middle of the battlefield, his massive form towering over the smaller human. "You've outsmarted us," the general growled. "But you can't defeat us in a true fight." Jack stood tall, unshaken. "You fight with strength, Kayak. But strength alone doesn't win wars. It's about understanding your enemy, using your mind as well as your muscles." The Zorathian general growled in frustration. He had never been taught to fight like this, and he didn't know how to respond. In the Zorathian culture, victory was achieved through force. But Jack had shown him that war was more than just fighting. It was about strategy, patience, and, most importantly, knowing when to strike. Your warriors are strong, Jack continued. But even the strongest can fall when they don't know how to fight against something different. The Zorathian general was silent for a long time, his pride wounded. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to be outsmarted. He had always believed that strength was the key to victory, but Jack had shown him that there was more to war than power. "We will retreat for now," General Kayak finally said, his voice filled with grudging respect. "But know this, human, you have taught us a lesson today. Strength alone is not enough. We will learn from you." And just like that, Jack had changed the galaxy's view of warfare. The Zorathians, once known for their unstoppable warriors, had been taught the true meaning of battle not through strength, but through strategy and intellect. Jack had shown them that even the mightiest warriors could be brought down not with brute force, but with clever tactics and the willingness to fight smart, not hard. As Jack and his team left the battlefield, they knew the galaxy would never be the same. The Zorathians had learned a valuable lesson, and so had the rest of the galaxy. Sometimes, the greatest weapon in war wasn't strength, it was the ability to think differently. And Jack, the human, had taught them all that lesson. The Galactic Empire had always prided itself on control. It was a system built on power, fear, and obedience. Every race, every species, was bound by the laws set by the High Council, and their rule was absolute. But there was one exception. One human who would never kneel to their authority. His name was Ethan, a mercenary unlike any the galaxy had seen. Born on Earth, he had always been independent, a free spirit in a world that sought to contain him. From a young age, Ethan knew that he didn't belong within the confines of societal rules. He was too clever, too resourceful to be controlled. And the High Council, with all its vast power, would soon learn that there was no place for a mind like his in their rigid universe. It all began when Ethan was captured during a mission on a distant planet. His ship was shot down, and before he knew it, he was surrounded by the forces of the Empire. They had heard of him, of his reputation. He had taken down warlords, defeated armies, and escaped impossible situations. But none of that mattered now. He was in their custody, and they believed that they could break him. The High Council, intrigued by his legend, decided to make an example of him. They brought him to their grand prison station. Its walls were designed to hold the most dangerous prisoners, beings who had defied the Empire's laws. But Ethan wasn't like them. He wasn't a prisoner to be broken. He was a storm that couldn't be contained. The first attempt to control him came when they put him in the cell. It was a high-tech prison, with walls that could withstand any force, and bars that no one had ever escaped. They thought it would be easy. Keep him locked up, and eventually, he would bend to their will. But Ethan didn't sit in his cell and wait for the inevitable. Instead, he studied. He studied the routines of the guards, the layout of the station, and the technology that powered the prison. It wasn't long before he found weaknesses. The system wasn't perfect, and Ethan was never one to give up easily. They tried to break him mentally. They sent their best interrogators to extract information from him. They used every form of torture they had at their disposal. But Ethan didn't crack. No matter what they did, he remained silent. He didn't give them the satisfaction of begging for mercy. His mind was his own, and they couldn't touch it. Days turned into weeks, and still, Ethan resisted. The High Council was frustrated. They had never met someone who refused to be broken. They sent in their top minds, psychologists, strategists, and even an AI programmed to read minds and emotions. Yet, no matter how they tried, they couldn't control him. He had no fear. He had no weakness. He was untouchable. Frustrated, they decided to take a different approach. They believed that perhaps they could win him over by appealing to his pride. They offered him power, riches, and the chance to rule at their side. Might challenge their authority in a way they couldn't control. So, they ordered a final plan, a last-ditch effort to break the human. They sent in a group of the galaxy's most powerful warriors. They were genetically enhanced soldiers, trained to fight with deadly precision. Their mission was simple: destroy Ethan. But Ethan was ready. As the warriors approached, he had already calculated their every move. The moment they stepped into the cell, he sprang into action. He moved faster than they could react, using his surroundings to his advantage. In seconds, the soldiers were incapacitated, their weapons disarmed. Ethan had taken down the most powerful warriors in the galaxy, without breaking a sweat. The High Council, now fully aware of Ethan's abilities, finally understood. They had underestimated him. They had thought that with all their power, all their resources, they could control a single human. But Ethan had proven them wrong. He wasn't just any man. He was a force unto himself, a being who refused to be controlled by anyone, no matter how powerful. With the warriors defeated, Ethan made his escape. He didn't need to fight his way out. He simply outsmarted the guards, navigated the maze of corridors, and found his way to the hangar. He stole a ship, leaving the prison station behind. The High Council could do nothing to stop him. They had lost Dot. As Ethan flew through the stars, leaving the Empire behind. He knew one thing: they would never control him. No matter where he went, no matter what they did, he would always be free. The galaxy had learned an important lesson that day. You could imprison a body, but you could never imprison a mind like Ethan's. The High Council might rule the stars, but Ethan was a reminder that true freedom could never be tamed. And as long as there were people like him, the Empire's control would always be at risk. On a distant planet, far beyond the reaches of Earth, the Council of the Galactic Races gathered to discuss the latest issue that had come up. The Empire was growing, and new species were being integrated into their vast network. But none of them could prepare for what they would encounter next. The humans, whom they thought were a primitive and insignificant species, had just sent a representative to their planet, a human who had brought something unusual with him. To the alien leaders, this human's pet was nothing more than a strange curiosity, a little creature that looked fragile and harmless. It was a tiny human child, no taller than the average table, dressed in a ragged cloak, seemingly nothing more than a mere slave or servant to the human. They all laughed when the human introduced the creature, mocking the fact that such a small, insignificant being could be anything of importance. What could a species so young and weak possibly contribute to the Galactic Council? The alien leaders had long ago agreed that the humans were little more than a curiosity, a species with no real power or value. The petty squabbles they faced on their own planet were hardly worth paying attention to. But what happened next would forever change their minds. The human, standing tall in front of the council, seemed to exude confidence. "I ask for your attention," he said calmly. His voice wasn't forceful, yet it commanded the room's attention as though something unspoken lingered in the air. "Before you dismiss me, before you dismiss the human race, I have a gift for you." The alien leaders rolled their eyes, growing tired of the display. One of them, a towering insectoid creature with 3 eyes, sneered. "A gift?" It hissed. What could the human possibly offer that we don't already have? The human, unfazed, pointed to the small pet beside him. The council's laughter grew louder as they watched the tiny human creature stir. It shuffled forward awkwardly, and with what looked like great effort, it finally looked up at the council. The galaxy's elite were expecting nothing more than a simple grunt or a plea for food. But then, with a voice more powerful than any of them could have imagined, the human pet spoke. "You laugh at us, but the galaxy has underestimated our kind for far too long," the pet said, each word carrying a weight of authority and intelligence. "We are not as weak as you think. We are not the primitive species you dismiss." The room went silent. The leaders of the council exchanged confused glances. They had never expected anything like this. The human pet, this insignificant being they had dismissed as a mere servant, had spoken with a voice that carried with it an undeniable truth. One of the alien leaders, a heavily armored being with multiple mechanical limbs, leaned forward, clearly taken aback. "What are you saying?" it demanded, its voice rising. "You think the humans have something to offer us?" The human Pete's eyes gleamed with an intelligence that was rare even among the most brilliant species in the galaxy. Not just the humans, it replied, but our whole species. You are all blind to the true power we possess. You are too busy laughing to see that we have evolved in ways you could never understand. The insectoid alien spoke next, its voice cold and dismissive. We control armies that can wipe out entire worlds with a single thought. Your kind couldn't even imagine defeating us. But the human pet smiled, a smile full of secrets. Maybe not yet, it said, but we have something you do not, Unity. The humans are a people who stand together, no matter what. No matter how much we suffer, we will fight back. And when we do, you'll wish you had never laughed. The words echoed in the room, each syllable holding a promise of something far more dangerous than any of them had ever anticipated. At first, the council dismissed it as mere bravado. But deep down, they all felt it a growing unease. The human race had always been seen as weak, insignificant, and scattered. Yet this tiny creature, speaking on behalf of its kind, had planted a seed of doubt in their minds. As the meeting progressed, more and more of the council members began to look at the human and its pet differently. What if they were wrong? What if the human species had something they hadn't noticed? The council had always been in control of their own worlds, but had they truly seen the potential for danger in humanity? They knew the power of technology, of military might, and of strategic brilliance. But what had they ever seen from humans beyond their petty squabbles? Nothing, that's what they thought. But now, there was something unsettling in the air, an energy they could no longer ignore. The human pet wasn't done. Its final words rang out, leaving the room in stunned silence. Don't make the mistake of underestimating us. The day will come when the universe will not be laughing anymore. And then, you'll remember this moment, the moment when you thought we were just pets. The human, still standing tall, slowly turned and began walking toward the door. The pet followed close behind, its eyes never leaving the council. The council leaders, once so sure of their superiority, now found themselves uncertain. The tiny human and its pet had said nothing extraordinary, nothing that could be proven right away. But it had sparked something, a feeling they couldn't shake. Was humanity really as weak as they thought? Time would tell. But one thing was certain, they would never laugh again. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless races, each more powerful and ancient than the last. Some were known for their wisdom, others for their war machines, and many for their ruthless tactics. But among all the races, none had ever faced the sheer will and determination of a single human. It all began on the war-torn planet of Varkar. The planet had been a hotspot of conflict for centuries, with factions from all over the galaxy fighting for control. Human forces had been sent to Varkar on a mission that was supposed to be simple: neutralize a small insurgent group. But as soon as they arrived, everything went wrong. The insurgents were backed by a ruthless alien race known as the Krayal. The Krayal were notorious for their brutal methods, and they controlled an army that outnumbered the human forces 1,000 to 1. They'd already destroyed most of the human fleet, and now only one human soldier remained on the planet. His name was Sergeant Ethan Drake. Ethan was not like the soldiers who fought beside him. He had no superpowers, no advanced alien technology. What he had was something far more dangerous: pure, unyielding determination. When the last of his comrades fell in battle, Ethan was left standing alone on the blood-soaked soil of Varkar. With nothing but his rifle and his wits, he made the decision to continue the fight. The Krayal, confident in their victory, thought little of Ethan. He was just one human soldier. What could he possibly do against their massive empire? They didn't know Ethan Drake. And they didn't know what the human spirit could achieve when pushed to its limits. Ethan spent days hiding in the planet's rugged terrain, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He knew the Krayal would not expect him to keep fighting. They would assume he had either been killed or would surrender. But surrender was not an option. Ethan had seen too much death, too much destruction. He couldn't give up. Not now. Not ever. With each passing day, he grew more desperate but also more focused. He used the environment to his advantage, setting traps for the Krayal soldiers, picking them off one by one. They couldn't understand how one human could be so relentless. They sent wave after wave of soldiers to find him, but each wave was repelled. The Kraal generals were furious. They couldn't fathom how a single human could continue to elude their grasp. "Where is he?" one of them demanded, slamming his fist on the table. This human should have been dead days ago. But Ethan was still out there. The longer the chase went on, the more the Kraal realized they had underestimated humanity. They were used to quick victories, to overwhelming power, but they had never encountered someone who refused to accept defeat. Ethan had become a ghost, slipping through their fingers again and again, a living nightmare they could not stop. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan's strength began to wane. He had no food, no water, and the wounds he had sustained were taking their toll. But even in his weakened state, he never stopped moving, never stopped fighting. The Kraal might have the numbers, but they would never break his spirit. On the 7th week, the Kraal launched their final assault. They gathered every soldier, every ship, and every weapon they had left. They were determined to end this once and for all. They would wipe out this last human, and then the planet of Varkar would be theirs. The battle was fierce. The ground shook with the force of the explosions, and the sky was filled with the sounds of lasers and gunfire. Ethan fought with everything he had left, each shot more precise than the last. He had learned their tactics, learned their weaknesses, and used them to his advantage. But even a soldier like Ethan could not fight forever. As the Kraal soldiers closed in on him, he found himself outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped. They had him cornered. This was it. This was the end. But then something happened. The Kraal soldiers advanced on him, ready to strike the final blow. A loud roar echoed across the battlefield. It was the sound of a ship human reinforcements had arrived. The Kraal were shocked. They had thought the humans were done for, but in the final moments, a fleet of human ships appeared in the sky, launching a surprise attack on the Kraal forces. Ethan had known that he was not truly alone. His message had reached home, and now they were here to help. The Kraal, caught off guard and overwhelmed by the sudden attack, were forced to retreat. Ethan had done it. He had not only survived, but he had also brought victory to the humans. The battle for Varkar was won. But as the smoke cleared and the dust settled, Ethan stood alone on the battlefield. His comrades had arrived too late to save him. They had come to honor his fight, but Ethan didn't care about glory or recognition. He had done what no one thought was possible. He had stood alone against an empire and lived to tell the tale. Looked out across the battlefield. His heart still racing from the battle, he couldn't help but smile. It had been the longest fight of his life, but it had been worth it. The Kraal had learned that humans were not to be underestimated, and Ethan Drake had proven that, when pushed to the edge, one human was enough to change the course of history. Ethan was the last human standing, and that was all that mattered.